Welcome to the Q&A. Right, good. We're now to the Q&A. So has anybody got any questions regarding this demonstration, Odin, the language itself, or anything else? So one question's got, okay, are you using LLVM for optimization? The answer is currently yes. So Odin is using LLVM as the main backend. It is planned very soon. Well, I say very soon. It's just soon. It's in the timeline to go to a custom backend. The main reason for this is compile times and also control. So LLVM at the moment takes up about 8% of the entire compile time. Not in like optimization builds. That is a huge part of the build. So Odin is a very simple language, and I've designed it to be very fast to compile. And that's by design. And LLVM itself is just so slow in comparison. And the thing is, it shouldn't be, but it is. So the plan is we're going to have our own backend, and so it'll be a much faster backend, and we'll have more control of it. One of the things is LLVM does have its own ways of doing things, and we can't always control that. And also LLVM has its own bugs. Like there was a bug the other day which actually prevented me from doing this demonstration on Thursday, where I was trying to figure out a bug, and it was actually a bug in LLVM itself. I do encounter these a few times, and it's very difficult to replicate them in pure LLVM on its own. So it's one of those where it's getting more annoying to have use LLVM than it is to just what's the best way of putting this? It's more annoying to use LLVM than just I could have just wrote the entire backend myself and gone right to a machine code or assembly or whatever, an object file. Okay? Hope that's answered some questions. Is there anything similar to go-get than the repository name? Currently, no. And planned feature, no either. So this may sound bizarre. The main reason for this is that I do not want to support a package system, like a package manager. Mainly because personally I think the concept of a package manager itself is actually a simple problem to solve if the concept of a package is well defined. This is where the problem with package managers, people go crazy over them. I actually really hate them. Like, I know this is maybe a bit personal, but I really find them annoying. Because one, you're relying on an external source to download your stuff from. Many people use them randomly to just do quick things, but first off, you don't even trust where the thing comes from. So that's the first thing. Second, what if the repository download doesn't have the particular version of thing that you have anymore? Well, you're now screwed. What about if you... This is where personally I think, okay, download or store everything in that project that you need in that project itself. Bundle it up. And then you don't have to worry about versions because it's the code's in there. This may sound be annoyed for a few people, but it's like, this is, in my opinion, in practice, this is so much easier to handle. It's so much better. I will not, and again, this is one of the things, I will not support a package manager officially. If people want to build their own, that's absolutely fine. In fact, I probably may even encourage it in some cases. But the thing is, if a package manager is very difficult to implement, then that's a sign that the concept of a package in the language is not well defined and needs to be defined more. So hopefully that answers your question. Is there something like JAI workspaces, or could you talk a bit about how building project works in Odin? So there are no JAI workspaces because JAI workspaces requires compile time execution. I'm not a person. This is one of the things where I was originally planned to having compile time execution, and I'm now starting to think probably not the best idea to have. And this because I want to keep the language quite simple. And adding compile time execution is not a simple feat. Not in the sense that it complicates the language, not necessarily it complicates the compiler. If that makes any sense. So that means then you have also, it also complicates what's going on. Because once you have compile time execution, you then kind of have to think, okay, what order do things get executed in? It also has to, you aim to be deterministic, unless you've been explicitly undeterministic in a particular case. So if you now got determinism to worry about, it starts being a very difficult problem to solve. You then have to make sure you have a VM built into the compiler, which means then you're going to have to make sure that your VM supports the correct architecture that you're going to be building to. That you also, everything you're going to be generating is also going to, you see where it starts going to go down. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's clearly not impossible. My issue is it starts complicating the language up, and it actually probably causes issues in the language, where it means you can only do certain things at compile time which you couldn't do at runtime. And what I mean is that you can run anything at compile time, but the data it's generated can only be of certain data types. It starts being a bit complicated, but it's one of those where I'm like, it's probably not worth it. And if I really need different build stages, one, the compiler should be extremely fast. So I should be able to just say, okay, here's a compiler. I have two different stages, pass one in, pass another one in. I'm starting to think that's probably the saner approach to a lot of this metaprogramming issue. Even though it should be nice to have it part of the language, it's like, even then, it's probably not enough. Okay, that's just a personal opinion. I'm not, and it's also a current one. It's not final or anything. But okay, I hope that answers some questions. Maybe one day you'll work for the Odin Foundation. If I actually had enough money to make up this at the moment. The Patreon, by the way, there is a Patreon for me. If I just write it in, I have a Patreon. You can become a Patreon on patreon.com/gingerbill. At the moment, this is just my beer money. I'm not really bothered how much, if you pay or not. This is just literally paying for the beer for main use of this stuff. And you can just support here. But it's absolutely great. And mostly, most of the money I'm going to is going to support other people, such as like Alan Webster, who's doing 4Coder, and also Abner Coimbre, who's who now actually works for John. I'm still supporting him, mainly because I still love the stuff he does. And Alan Webster, who's also doing 4Coder, which is a very, very great thing. So 4coder.net, very good text editor. If you want an Emacs replacement, there it is. I highly recommend it. Good. I'm using Sublime as well, but that's main thing. That's what I use for most platforms. So whatever. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, what type of beer is the question? Oh, I prefer like dark malty things, so like stouts and porters and stuff like that, or bitters. What else I like? I cannot drink lager. I'd rather just drink water or anything else. I really hate lager. But yeah, I like dark stuff. I also like the alcohol I also drink. Other alcohols are it's like rum as well, like spirits here or whiskey and stuff like that. So sometimes, like, again, how Odin started was literally I was drunk on rum. I drank a lot of rum and just said, screw this, I'm making my own language. And if it wasn't for rum, so thank you rum, Odin wouldn't exist. So is any other questions, are there any other questions about anything particular about the language, anything about anything else? Just, it's fine. I won't be here for that much longer just because it is quite late at night tonight, and I particularly do want some sleep. But I can probably stay up a little bit longer, it's fine. Okay, people in the chat are discussing names for the new Odin Foundation, of course, because Odin's now going to become a charity or a non-profit. I mean, I could, but I doubt I'd get enough money. Oh, someone's asking about my single header file libraries. So, yeah, so what I have some support. I actually produced some, let's go find them on. So I have some GB libraries. So these are some single file header libraries that I use. Most of these I'm actually not using anymore because I'm using Odin all the time. But the gb.h one is one that's used in the actually Odin compiler. So I use this particular header file, this is the entire library. It's 10,000 lines long, nearly 11,000, but it has everything I need that replaces the C standard library for, because one of the things when you're working with C or C++ is that the C standard library is dreadful. It is absolutely awfully designed, so bad, and you have to replace it. But yeah, so I implement some data types, and for instance, like the new uint here, literally some of the basic data types I have to define, which make it more sane. Some different things there. Other keywords, like for instance, inline, restrict, no inline, thread local. My little cast macro, which all it does is nothing, but it makes it easier to grep. Okay, this is where the idea from Odin as an operating name from is casting. It's very useful. Size of, but actually returns a signed size of. Count of, which tells me a count of a static array. Offset of, line of, swap, unused. A defer macro, so I can do defers in C++. This is some of these very useful things to have. Yeah. What else is in here? Panics, asserts, pointer addition, pointer operations if I need to do something particular. Mem copy, mem move, my own mem copy, mem move. So yeah, atomics, very hit. So you can see the semaphores, mutexes, threads. This is a complete C replacement. And that's very good. So someone's asking, can the compiler output the abstract syntax tree to allow for transpilation? That's a very weird word to say. To other languages. The answer is no, but it's not impossible. I could actually do it. It'd be a really simple, like literally a weekend project. I could do that. My question is, what format would that abstract syntax be in? And how would you do it, is my question. Because the abstract syntax tree is pretty basic, but my question is, what format would you find useful? Would you just like a generic format for the thing? Which, by the way, I'm actually designing an arbitrary, I already designed it actually, an arbitrary binary format, which can do stuff like that. Which I'm then doing another project with, keeping secret. But yeah, so an example of how to use a single file header library. Well, it's at the top. You must define GB implementation exactly once within your C program and header. So something like this. And then every time you else want to use it elsewhere, you can just include it elsewhere. So it's very simple to use. It's in the style of the STB libraries, Sean Barrett. Other stuff that I'd highly recommend do. So at GitHub, other things, STB. These are where the idea I got for these single file libraries come from. Highly recommend these to people. STB is what I use for image loading. It's absolutely great. And there's some good stuff in here like true type loading or a Vorbis loader. These are some again, the single file libraries usually follow the same pattern where you define the implementation is a macro and includes it. It's just single file. The reason why this is very useful in C is because there is no concept of a package in C. In Odin, there would be no need for this. You just copy in the directory and be done. They would not have to worry about any of this because also there are no header files in Odin. There's no need. Okay, that is good. So any more questions? I probably will go for another 10 minutes and then call it a night because this is nearly 2 hours long and I've not had a break with my voice yet. Luckily I can speak for quite long hours. Fun fact, I used to be a radio presenter, so I'm used to talking with my voice. I hate the sound of my voice, but I can do it. Any other questions? So someone saying S expressions or something like that. Yeah, it's probably, if that's the case, I'd rather just go straight for a binary format and just do that. Anything else? What was it? I was just a standard radio, music radio and stuff. I actually used to do a drive time show with someone. He used to love, what's the best way of putting this? Northern soul music. I don't know if people outside of the UK would know what that is. Northern soul. That was one of the shows I used to do. Northern soul. So mid-60s music. It's really hard to explain. So any popular bands might be a good way of explaining this. But yeah. Yeah, the mod scene and stuff like that. That was one of my. I used to like doing that, but I like blues and jazz as well. I used to play and stuff. So influences, that's fine. I'm trying to find some popular Northern Soul artists. Let's go to Last FM, see what the top ones are. So Gloria Jones, or The Impressions, or Frank Wilson. There we go. So these are Jackie Wilson. There we go. I'm just thinking of Northern Soul style stuff. Yeah, if that makes any sense. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, that's what I used to do. Any other questions while I'm here? It's quite late at night in my time zone. It's probably in the morning, or I don't know where else. Oh, someone's made a good joke. Northern Soul Northern Soul, not to be confused with Northern Soul, spelt with S-O-L-E, which is a music genre about local chippies. What are some future features that you're thinking of? Yeah, so other than the custom backend is one of them. Another one is going to allow for custom assembly. Now, I'm not sure if it should be inline or as on a package level. That's one thing to do. That's one thing. What else is there to do? There are a few other features, but it's mainly just compiler work. The language is nearly done, other than a few tweaks here and there, maybe with the syntax. But the actual semantics of the language, I don't think there's anything else I really need. It's a pretty well done language, in my opinion. Like, there's a lot in it that's very useful for me. So you could ask for some ideas of features, but it's more like the better way I would always phrase with this is, what is your problem? And yeah, still to go with the Chrome web browser. I do live dangerously. I'm only using it as Chrome at the moment because I usually use Firefox or Opera, but Firefox has been dodgy with me at the moment. It does not like my graphics card. So I've been having to go back to Chrome for the moment, that's all. But yeah, that's it. Yeah. So question is there a go-to? The answer is no. But I've not actually even needed go-to. So the reason why, just a quick overview. In Odin, there are three concepts that reduce the need for a go-to. First of which is defer. So I'm just going to say it could be, this is pseudocode, this is not real code. So I could say open, this could be like os.open, whatever I want to say, and it could be foo.text. This is not real, but whatever. And then you could just say defer close on that file. You could have an error on there. If error deferred doesn't equal, let's say, nil, I don't know, I'm just doing this, then handle error, whatever. So this is seems like very Go-like, but these defers are scope based. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I have allowed, so that's the first thing. The second thing is you could have, let's say you have a for loop, and it has some condition, and then you're nested in really deep, like so. and then you want to break out of this. But the thing is, you wanted to break out all of this. So in C, you'd have something like label, and then this, and then you just go to label. That's the first thing. But in Odin, there's no real need for that. Like, the problem you're trying to do is you're trying to break out of a certain loop. You're not trying to jump to it here. You're just trying to break out the loop. So go to doesn't make any like conceptual sense. So what I would just say is name that loop. Literally, name it like you name a variable in a sense, like loop cut in the for loop, and just break out the loop. Okay? So that's one way of doing it. Does that already solve something? And the other thing is I can nest procedures in here. So I can say another foo, and then I can just call procedures in here. So these three things together actually reduce virtually every single need that I have ever needed for GoTo. There are one or two cases where GoTo would be extremely useful, but because I can just call a procedure in most cases, that can imitate what GoTo needs. And by the way, yes, this named thing also works for continue. Very good, remember the thing. So you can always continue in that particular loop. You can just break out and continue. There is very little need for me to use GoTo anymore. Now, I'm not saying I'm against GoTo. I do think there are valid reasons to have GoTo. So I'm not one of those people who say, oh, GoTo is always bad. I'm like, that's just stupid dogma. Like, think about it from a practical standpoint. There are some cases where GoTo is probably the best solution. But it's one of those where I've gotten to the point where it's probably not a good solution. And one of the issues with GoTo now is with the fur in the language, it actually makes it really complicated to define the rules. So then the language actually becomes very complicated. So you'd have to define really complex rules about how defer and GoTo would work together. And you'd have to restrict how they'd work. So GoTo also complicates things when you have defer. That's the one reason. So someone was just saying, okay, I just saw a talk where the error handling pattern was shunned down upon by one of the Go creators. Right, so I actually have a little rant about this. So let me just bring this up. Because someone was actually talking about this. Yeah, this is the blog post, so I'll put this in the comments just here, whatever. But exceptions and why Odin will never have them. This was it. And this is actually based on someone had posted an issue, and they were asking, Odin, can we have exceptions in Odin? And my answer was, no. Just no. And my answer for this is one, I'll explain it with this thing. I can just read it through again. So I will never have software-based exceptions language. It doesn't make any sense. I'll have hardware exceptions because they're at the hardware level. That's not an issue. But software-based exceptions, I absolutely hate the entire philosophy behind them. Now, Go does have exceptions. So I was talking about something like Go has exceptions. They have defer, panic, recover, but they're weird on purpose. And they're weird on purpose because they're meant to be used for exceptional cases, so their syntax is exceptionally weird on purpose. But most people use exceptions to be just general error handling, and they do. You cannot say, but you should only be using them to do them for exceptional cases. But most people don't do that. And in certain languages, like say a dynamic language, it actually makes perfect sense to have exceptions as the error handling approach to get to the type safety, because you've lost it by going into a dynamic language. So that's one thing. So what I want to talk here is like, okay, say, just take Python example. I have a call here which is x is foo, and this could throw an exception of this, this, or this. Great. And people say, this is so lovely to write. I don't have to worry about any error all the time. I can just put a try catch block over and handling like that. I don't have to worry about that. And I'm like, okay, if you think that's a good way of handling things, you can do that in Odin. You can just have an error type, which is a union, which has different errors in it. You can return the error type from the thing, and then switch on it. The syntax is virtually the same, but it did the exact same thing. But yeah, so it's like, okay, so the semantics, not much different. So the actual syntax is not different. Sorry, someone was asking about, did I mention embedded assembly? So the plan is maybe I want to have it. I'm not sure if it should be embedded, like inline assembly, or it should be something that's part of the build system. Like it'll be in a package and then you reference the assembly file itself and do it that way. So and be part of like the foreign import system, because assembly is technically foreign code. So I'm not sure which way to approach it at the moment. Neither are technically that difficult, but they are just, I'm not sure which way is more idiomatic, if that makes any sense. Like, should I intermingle foreignness in the actual thing? Do I want to be xenophobic in the language? I don't know. You know what I mean? Xenophobic in that. That's not the right word. Xenolingua phobic. Yeah, so foreign language fear. Oh God, my Latin's awful. It's probably bad Latin. Please don't comment. But yeah, so I'm just saying here that back to my talk about is this: the syntax for handling exceptions and just like unions are identical. Like the syntax looks virtually the same. One you're doing a try block case, one you're doing a switch case. Okay. Right. Oh, sorry, I'll be very clear again. Sorry, I'm jumping around, but the assembly. No, I do want assembly. Okay, I just don't know if it should be handled as inline assembly or should be part as a file within the package. So I'm not sure where to put that assembly, if that makes any sense. It's not that I don't want assembly. Oh, hell yeah, I want assembly. I just don't know where to put it. Okay, whew, hopefully that explained a bit more clearer then. Phew. So I wanted to kind of just go through this. So I said semantics are very similar in each case, but the control flow for exceptions, so I'm juring over the place here, are slightly different. So in this case, this throws an exception. This is just a return value. And in this exception, is if you do not handle it, it goes up the stack. So exceptions again require unwinding the stack. Most exception implementations require unwinding the stack. I should be explicit with that. And again, this is extremely slow compared to just reading the fixed constant like a return value. Now, I had gone to an argument once like this a few months ago where someone was saying, well, exceptions are only slow when they actually get called. And I'm like, that's the point I'm arguing about. But seriously, that was their entire argument. They're only slow when they get hit. And I'm like, but when they get hit, they're very slow, aren't they? I'd rather know deterministically what the actual cost is. Like return values are much easier. I know them deterministically. Exception, don't know. Don't know. But people use them as error handling all the time. Yeah? So someone may say, okay, what about if we want to do a catch-all case? Well, in Python, you just have a catch-all exception. Yeah? In Odin, you just say, in this case, it was sending the error type was just a union. You just say, is it nil? If it's not nil, then catch it, please. Now, I always go on again. I go on to the next thing I was saying. If one advantage many people like with exceptions is the ability to catch any error from a block of code. Look how simple it is. I don't have to handle the errors. They just do it for me. Now, here's where my problem is. I'm like, I find this, again, I personally see this as a huge vice rather than a virtue. Because when I want to read the code, because 90% of the time you're reading code, you're not writing it, I want to know what's happening. Okay, so where did this exception come from? When I'm reading it, I have no idea. Like, I seriously have no idea where it's going from. So it's kind of like, what? So for me, I like the explicitness. And it's also because if you go with the exception handling approach, it also means people get lazy and they become, and it's kind of a bit of a vicious cycle. So people just it becomes a culture of we just pass it up the stack and let it handle on someone. So there's a propagation of errors. And I really do hate this culture. It's a very common culture. And I do not want to encourage this at the language level. I really don't. I think you should handle errors, again, I say there and then, and don't pass them up stack. You make your mess, you clean it. And that's kind of a very big personal philosophy for me. So when going back to what triggered this, which was the Go thing, everyone's complaining about this Go thing. They're saying, "Oh, I hate this. I hate typing the if doesn't equal nil, return this. Oh, why can't we just this if bit is just annoying." For me, I have no problem with the if bit. In fact, I think it's fine. The bit I hate is the returning of it. Like, okay, you've noticed there's an error. Handle the damn thing. Handle it. Don't pass it back up the stack. Now you've just got exceptions with a different control flow. This is... I even put a proposal for the draft of GoTo proposal, which they wanted to reduce this amount of typing with the ifs. Like, and I just was like, they're saying, oh, this is issue. We've got to just keep returning errors all the time. This is not, oh, this is just too much code. And I'm like... And then so look what's prettier with doing this. And I'm like, it's stupid. And I don't mean this as being horrible. This is literally stupid. Because okay, let's explain why I'm reading the code. I'm going, okay, I'm going to check this value. Okay, how do I check it? I have to go up here. Okay, defer. Then check, I've got to go back up here again. Notice I'm having to jump up and around the code. While if I did this approach, I'm reading it top down and it's perfectly fine. I'm understanding this. And it's like, yes, it may be a little bit more verbose, but I know exactly what's going on. I'm going, okay, they're trying to open a file. Oh, they're checking an error here. Oh, they're jumping out early. Great. Now they're going to defer it. I want my code to read like it makes logical sense. I don't want to jump around just to reduce typing. I know this is a very unpopular opinion. I know it is. Like, they just want to reduce typing in this case. Like, I think this is stupid. Like, this is literally, you're trying to reduce typing in a language, which I don't think is a bad idea at times. But it's just, I can rant about this all day. But yeah, it's one of these where, and also at the point here I was saying, I hope this have cleared up some of the questions regarding owning, why I don't want my reasons on error handling. And this is also a very important thing I want to point. I think error handling ought to be treated like any other piece of code. And I kind of put my own little quote, with many rules there are unexpected emergent behaviour. Because you can have something so beautiful and simple of rules, like the game of Go, the board game Go. The rules are so simple, but the amount of emergent behaviour and complexity you get from it is a lot. And it's crazy. And like, you can get certain patterns that form in there, and you can have say co in there, like this kind of like things, or you can have different idioms that part in like you can have like a comb shape, and that's a very strong structure in the game of Go. But again, the rules themselves don't really explain that would ever happen. They just arise from that behaviour. It's kind of like, so if you have loads of different features, you have to worry about how they will interact with other things. And there's so much to worry about there. There really is. And if you're trying to design a language, I have to make sure that one of my goals is trying to make sure all the features are kind of orthogonal to one another, which means you can add them together and they don't matter. They don't interact with each other in a sense, like axes, like X and Y. If they're orthogonal, it doesn't make a difference. My issue, though, is what's the best way to put this? What's the best way to think here? And also sometimes if you can't have a feature that's orthogonal, try and keep its domain very small, so its effect is also small. If that makes any sense. And also my little comment, I actually forgot I wrote this. P.S. If you really want exceptions, you can long jump until the cows come home. Oh, yeah. Actually, I got that from Aaron. It was like, yeah, that's actually true. You can just do that. It's another way of implementing exceptions with just long jumps. It works. But yeah, I'm going to just go on a mild tangent again back to passing up the stack. And this is not meant to be as a criticism. This is just like a personal behaviour, but personal preference. In the language SIG, if you don't know, this is a language that I think Andrew is developing. Oh, I can't remember his surname. Sorry, I'm not awful at names. Andrew Kelly, that's his name, and Andrew Kelly is working on this language called Zig. So let me just Zig lang here, and it's a very interesting language. I will talk about it. I do note it, but one of the things he kind of advertises is source code documentation. Let's go to the documentation, or as an example, it would be in the documentation. Yeah. So it's these exclamation mark things and these try. He's trying to do a very, I think it's a clever idea, is trying to get the semantics of what try and catch would have, but without having try and catch exceptions unwinding. You just return a return value. So he has return value types, like this is a void type, but this exclamation mark means it has an error value to it. You can return. So for instance, this case is going to try and get this call and note the try, and if it fails, it returns an error value. So it seems like a really clever idea. But note the thing I pointed out previously. I do not like propagation of errors. I think this is a very sloppy way of handling things, and it means it becomes a culture, and you naturally tend to just not handle things. You just pass them up the stack. And that's my point. It's not that the idea isn't theoretically bad. It's like, you're dealing with humans here. The idea may be great, but people like being lazy, and people just, oh, I don't want to do this, I'll pass it on to something else. There's no incentive to stop people from doing it. And it will just become a mess. But I know loads of people, I just don't like this culture in programming. I really don't. Even if I do like some of the stuff in Zig, I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, again, I prefer Odin clearly to Zig, but there's some really cool stuff in here. But there's some stuff where I'm like, I don't think it's needed. But that's just me. Yeah, you can check out Zig if you want. It's got more of a Rust style approach to things. If you can read it, like, look, it's got fun in there, like Rust, and all return types must be void in Zig as well, and like that. But again, it's one of those things. And also in here, he has structs has functions in there, like it has things like that. But it's just, for me, I'm not a big fan. I really am not. But again, each to their own, I guess. Whatever you're productive with, please use that. So thank you for listening tonight. I know there are one or two questions I haven't answered, such as how I haven't covered the context stuff or the allocation. I really just want to go to sleep tonight. It is 1 in the morning, so 12:42 at the moment. That is quite late for me, and I need to be up in the morning. So thank you all for tuning in tonight, and I hope you've enjoyed watching this and also enjoyed it. Good night.